The wind at dusk carried a bite that only came in late November, when the snow hadn't yet come, but the earth already knew it was dying. Josiah Hale stepped off the westbound freight with his jaw clenched and his coat collar turned up, boots thick with mud and ash. He had the look of a man whittled down, with deep creases around his eyes and the hollowed-out frame of someone who'd done too much burying in too little time. His left hand still bore the dent of his wedding band, though the gold itself had been gone 3 winters now. He came to Parsons Hollow with nothing but a hatchet, a sack of dried beans, and the deed to 80 acres of brush-choked land he'd never wanted. The house was barely standing. The roof sagged like a broken back, and the chimney leaned east as if trying to leave. Inside, the smell of mold and rat droppings was a bitter welcome. He didn't drink, didn't talk much either, just worked. From sunup to dark, he felled trees, patched walls, stacked stone, pulled the rot from the house with a kind of savage patience. The neighbors, few and spread out, called him that hollow man on the ridge. They said he came from Tennessee, where his wife and 2 babies died in the fever. Others whispered he'd gone to war after and never come back right in the head. Nobody asked him direct. He wouldn't have answered anyway. Then came the day the train brought her. It was the 4:12 out of Millerton, wheezing its way through the low hills like a dying animal. The station in Parsons Hollow wasn't much, just a platform of warped planks and a shack that smelled of tobacco and mildew. Josiah wasn't even there for the train. He'd come to pick up a crate of nails ordered 6 weeks back. But when the train stopped, the conductor stepped off with a long sigh and said, "You're still here, Christ. Girl, come on now." She descended slow, holding a parcel to her chest, her dress strained across her hips and sleeves tugged tight over her arms. She wasn't young, maybe 30, maybe older. Her cheeks were flushed not with shyness, but heat, effort, maybe anger. Her hat sat crooked on her head, and her boots were far too fine for this stretch of dirt and soot. The station agent took one look at her and frowned. "You the mail-order bride." She nodded once. "Graham boy left town last week. Ran off with the schoolteacher, far as I heard." She didn't flinch, didn't cry, just stood there, arms locked around her parcel. The train hissed and pulled away without her. Wind moved the hem of her dress like it was trying to reveal more of her than she wanted. The agent shrugged. "Well, damn." Josiah watched from behind the crate, one hand on the wood like it might break open. Something about her didn't match the picture. She wasn't soft, wasn't blushing or delicate. She looked like she could split wood if asked. She looked furious, and tired and proud. She turned to the station agent, voice clear. "I was promised a man. I quit my work, sold my mother's watch, and took this train from Ohio. I don't aim to beg, and I sure as hell won't be going back." The agent laughed. "Ain't my problem, miss." Josiah stepped forward. He hadn't meant to. Something in his legs moved without consulting the rest of him. He walked to her and said, "You eat." She turned to him, eyes narrowed. "Come on," he said. "There's beans on the stove." And that was how they left the station. No fanfare, no crowd, just a man with calloused hands leading a woman in pinched boots up a frozen road. They said nothing the first half-mile. Then she asked, "You married?" "Was," Josiah said. "You want another." He looked at her. She wasn't afraid of the answer, and she wasn't asking to flirt. "You were expecting someone skinny, I guess," she added, not looking at him. He said, "I didn't expect anyone." They reached the house. She looked it over with that same unflinching stare and said, "I've slept colder." Inside, she took off her coat. Josiah stirred the pot on the stove, poured her a bowl without comment. She ate like she hadn't in days. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and said, "You got a Bible." He fetched it from the drawer, dusted it off. She opened it, flipped to a verse neither of them read aloud, and said, "If you'll have me, we're married now. If you won't, I'll sleep in the barn tonight and be gone in the morning." He didn't speak for a while. The wind moaned against the chimney. The fire popped. "You'll stay," he said. "We'll make it legal when the preacher comes through." She nodded once. "I'm called Mercy," she said. He looked at her, not smiling. "Josiah." And that was how it began, not with love, not even hope, but a kind of recognition. 2 people not saved but spared, for now. The first frost came that night, white lace along the window panes. Mercy woke early, before the rooster, and found the wash basin frozen over. She broke the surface with the edge of her hand and cleaned herself as best she could, jaw tight from the sting. Josiah was already gone, off in the woods with his axe, a black shape against the fog as he worked through the standing trees like they owed him something. She boiled coffee thick enough to float a horseshoe and fixed cornbread with what was left of the lard. When he came back, she handed him a plate without comment, and he nodded his thanks without looking up. This became the way of it. Two bodies working around each other like weathered machinery, never clashing, never quite meeting. The neighbors noticed. A month passed, and no one had seen her leave the ridge. No visits to the store, no appearances at chapel. Some claimed Josiah had gone and brought himself a ghost bride. Others said she was a foreigner, maybe touched in the head, maybe worse. No one bothered to find out. Parsons Hollow was good at leaving folks alone until it was. By mid-December, Mercy had fixed the draft in the kitchen, set traps for the rats, and scrubbed the mold from the back wall with lye until her hands blistered. Josiah didn't ask her to do any of it, and she didn't tell him what she'd done. Some days they barely spoke 10 words, but when she coughed blood into her sleeve one morning, he noticed. He fetched horehound and made her drink it bitter and hot. She tried to hide the shiver that followed, but he wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders without a word. She watched him chop wood from the window, his shirt soaked with sweat, steam rising off his skin like smoke from a forge. He didn't limp, but there was a stiffness in his gait, like something in him had mended wrong. That evening, as he cleaned the mud from his boots, she asked, "Where'd you go to war?" He paused, not looking up. Chickamauga, then Missionary Ridge. "You come back with anyone?" "No." She nodded, me neither. They sat quiet after that, firelight flickering over the lines of their faces. By January, the marriage had settled like an old stone wall, rough but solid. She mended his shirts, and he carved her a butter paddle. When he cut himself to the bone one evening splitting a stubborn birch, she didn't flinch at the sight of blood. She poured whiskey over it, stitched it closed, and said, "Next time, mind the grain." He said, "You stitch like a field surgeon." She answered, "I've been one." He looked at her then, really looked. She didn't blink. The scar under her chin caught the firelight like a thin white thread. Then came the letter. Delivered in the hand of a boy from 2 towns over, its paper worn soft from travel, the envelope smudged with cold dust. Josiah read it once, jaw set tight, then handed it to her without a word. Claim laid, parcel 47 disputed. Family of Thomas Hale contesting inheritance. "Your brother?" she asked. "Cousin, barely." "What's he want with this place?" Josiah shrugged. "Ain't about the land, he just wants me gone." She folded the letter slowly. "He know about me?" "No." "Then he thinks you're still weak." Josiah didn't answer, just stared at the fire like he was waiting for it to speak. That night she took his hand under the quilt, not tender, not romantic, just solid and certain. A weight shared. He held on like a man gripping a cliffside, and neither of them said a thing. The snow came hard the next week, burying the fields, pressing silence into every corner. Inside the house, she read from the Psalms while he carved spoon handles out of cedar. She didn't soften, and neither did he, but there was something different now, an alliance, a readiness. She asked one morning, "This cousin of yours, he fight?" "No, too young." "Then he'll send someone." Josiah nodded. She finished stitching the sleeve of his winter coat and said, "Good, let him come." The wind screamed against the shutters, and somewhere out in the dark, a branch cracked under the weight of snow. Mercy stood, went to the door, and set the bolt. She turned back, her shadow long across the floorboards. "We'll need more shot," she said, "and a place to see them coming." He studied her then like she'd shifted shape. Not a bride, not a stranger, something else entirely. "You ain't what I expected," he said finally. Mercy gave a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No one ever is," she said. The thaw came late that year, slow and stubborn. Snow clung to the hollows and shaded slopes like it couldn't bear to leave. The ridge road turned to muck, wagon-deep in some places, and Mercy hauled the last of the ash buckets up the hill alone while Josiah limped behind her with the kindling. His leg had stiffened worse since the cold. He didn't complain. They didn't speak much of the letter, but they changed because of it. Mercy started sleeping with her boots close and a knife under her pillow. Josiah began checking the snares twice as often and hung a bell by the fence post, low to catch the ankle of any man unfamiliar with the land. When the snow finally gave way to mud and crocus shoots, it brought with it a boy. They heard the knock just after dusk, 3 sharp raps like a warning. Josiah opened the door with his rifle low and ready. The boy stood in the doorway barefoot, hair like straw and eyes too big for his face. "You Josiah Hale?" he asked. Josiah didn't answer. The boy handed over a slip of paper folded 4 times. "Said to give you this. Said if you read it and didn't come, they'd come instead." Josiah took it. Mercy stepped behind him with a hand to her apron pocket. "What's your name?" she asked. "Eben," he said. "You hungry?" He nodded. She fed him corn mash and the heel of bread, a jar of pears she'd set by in the root cellar. The boy ate fast, barely chewing, and thanked her between bites. When he finished, she gave him a wool blanket and told him to sleep by the hearth. He was gone come morning, but the letter was. It was short. "Come Easter, bring her if you want. Don't bring the gun. T." Mercy read it once, folded it, and burned it in the stove. "Do you know who her is supposed to be?" she asked. "Maybe he heard, maybe he's guessing." Mercy said nothing. The week before Easter, Josiah oiled his saddle and tested the weight of the pistol on his belt. Mercy cleaned the shotgun. She didn't ask permission. They rode down the ridge before dawn, following the creek south toward Catamount Valley. The sky was bone gray and the branches still bare overhead. A crow followed them for 2 miles, flitting from limb to limb as if watching. When they reached the town, it was smaller than Mercy expected. 1 saloon, 1 church, and a jail that looked like it hadn't held anyone dangerous in a decade. The store was shut. The only soul they passed was an old woman sweeping the stoop of a boarding house. She didn't look up. They tethered the horse near the livery and walked the rest of the way. Josiah led them to a 2-story house on the far edge of town, whitewashed, with clean shutters and a porch built to impress. "Tom's wife?" Mercy asked. "Died birthing twins," Josiah said. "Only one lived." "And the boy?" "With her people." He knocked once. The door opened slowly. Thomas Hale looked like a man who'd never worked a full day. Soft hands, heavy belly, mustache trimmed too neat. His eyes flicked to Mercy like she was an insect he didn't care to name. "You brought her," he said. Josiah stepped between them. "You called me out." "I'm offering peace." "Don't want it." Thomas sighed, turned, and walked inside. "You always were a damn mule." They followed. Inside, the air smelled of furniture polish and stale tobacco. A single lamp burned low. Thomas sat in a red chair by the fireplace, his boots up on a woven rug. "You should have sold the land," he said. "Ain't worth the fight. Could have taken the money and gone back east." "I came west to be left alone." "Well, you ain't alone now." His eyes moved to Mercy again. "She's not yours. She don't belong to anything." Mercy stepped forward. "I belong to what I choose, and I choose that land, that man, that life." Thomas smiled like she'd said something amusing. "You think that place is worth dying for?" She didn't blink. "I think some things ain't yours to take." Josiah said, "You come up that ridge, you better bring men ready to bury each other. You better pack shallow shovels." Thomas stood, adjusting his coat. "I won't come. The law will. Your deed's in dispute. Judge is a cousin of mine." Mercy tilted her head. "Then he's corrupt." "He's thorough." They left without shaking hands. Back on the ridge, things shifted. Mercy cut her hair short for the first time in her life. Josiah set a second tripwire at the base of the old sycamore. When they saw men on the trail a week later, they didn't hide. They watched from the loft window as 2 riders passed the lower pasture, slow and staring. A hawk circled overhead. Mercy watched it, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. "They'll try to make it legal," she said. "Force it in court, say I ain't your wife proper." Josiah looked over at her. "Then we make it proper." They rode for the preacher that Saturday, said the vows in a parlor with dust on the Bible and a crooked crucifix above the mantel. Mercy wore her plainest dress. Josiah didn't shave. It wasn't for show, just a signature on a page, a line drawn in ink and blood. That night they lay in the same bed for the first time. He didn't touch her. She didn't ask him to, but the silence between them was different now, not empty, waiting. She whispered before sleep took her, "Let them come." And he said, "They will." The law came in high summer, dressed in dust and blue sleeves. 3 men rode up the ridge just past noon, spooking the hens and sending the dog into a fit. Josiah saw them first from the tree line, where he'd been working on the fence. He wiped his hands on a rag and didn't hurry, just walked back to the house like it was any other day. Mercy met him on the porch, apron stained from stewing berries. She had a pistol tucked behind her spine and a small copper pin at her collar shaped like a cross. He nodded once. "Don't start nothing," she said, though her eyes held no hope they'd be spared that choice. The man in front wore a badge and a trimmed beard. The 2 behind him didn't look like deputies. One had a scar on his temple, the other a rifle he didn't bother to hide. "You Josiah Hale?" the bearded one asked. "I am." "Name?" "Foreman. I've come on court order out of Catamount Township. I'm here to give you notice your title is under dispute and you'll need to vacate until it's sorted." Josiah didn't move. Mercy stepped beside him. "Got no seal on that paper," she said. Foreman blinked. "No judge signs without a seal, and court don't send hired men with rifles unless they're expecting trouble." He shifted in the saddle. The man with the scar grinned. Foreman said, "Ma'am, I don't know who you think you're speaking to." "I know exactly," she said. Foreman cleared his throat and looked back at Josiah. "You can take this to court, file a petition, but you can't stay here under contested claim. Your cousin says this land's his by seniority and blood." "He's lying." "He's rich," Foreman said, voice cooling. "And in this county, that's near enough the same." Mercy didn't blink. "And what are you, Marshal, honest or just for sale?" Foreman didn't answer. He turned to the man with the scar. "Burn it." Josiah moved before the order finished its breath. The rifle from the porch was in his hands and pointed square. Mercy pulled her pistol, stance low and steady. The man with the scar paused. Foreman raised both hands. "Let's not." "Step off that horse," Josiah said. "No law broken here, yet." "You cross that line with fire in your hand," Mercy said, "and this becomes your grave." For a long moment, only the cicadas spoke. Then Foreman sighed and nodded to his men. "We'll be back." "You'll need more than 3, Josiah said. They turned their horses and rode off slow, like they weren't in retreat. But the dust behind them said otherwise. That night Josiah nailed a fresh sign at the base of the hill. It read, "This land is watched. Trespass ends in death." Mercy stood beside him with the lantern. "You think they'll wait for court?" "No. We should go to town, find out who sold the law." He shook his head. "We'd lose more than time." She didn't argue. Instead, she lit the oil lamp and sat down with the deed, 2 pens, and a knife. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Copying everything. If they burn it, we'll still have proof, hidden in 3 places." "Where'd you learn that?" "My father owned a print shop and lost it in a fire he didn't set. I was 12 when the bank came. We had nothing, I don't forget." He watched her for a long time. "You think we can win?" She looked up. "We already did," she said. "We're still here." They started training after that, not like soldiers, like survivors. Mercy practiced shooting by candlelight, then in pitch dark. Josiah mapped out the ridge by hand, marking blind spots and choke points where a wagon would sink or a horse would balk. At night they spoke more, sometimes about nothing. She told him about her sister gone in a house fire. He told her about a dog he once had that never came when called but always showed up when it counted. They never touched without need, but they slept with shoulders nearly touching now. Each night, the space between them shrank. Then came the fire. It started in the east pasture. Dry brush caught fast, spread faster. Josiah ran to cut it off. Mercy grabbed buckets and cloth and ran toward the barn. They fought it all night. By dawn they had scorched ground, a dead fence line, and lungs full of ash. But the house stood and the livestock lived. Josiah coughed blood into the dirt and looked at her with eyes gone red. "They're testing us." Mercy spat into the smoke. "Let 'em keep failing." They found boot prints in the dirt by the barn. Not 1 man, 3. None of them wore spurs. Josiah buried what was left of the sheep they couldn't save. Mercy set a second tripwire, then a third. She fashioned pungy sticks and hid them in the gully. He reinforced the back wall and cut rifle slits into the attic. One morning, Josiah woke to her curled beside him, forehead against his shoulder. She didn't move when he turned, just whispered, "If we go down, I'm glad it's with you." He didn't answer, just held her there until the light crept through the window, pale and thin. Outside, a hawk screamed. The ridge waited. They came on the first Sunday of August, early enough that the dew still clung to the grass, and the sun hadn't yet burned off the mist. 5 men, mounted and quiet, rode 2 abreast up the ridge trail with that slow, deliberate pace that meant they weren't there to talk. From the loft window, Mercy spotted them first. She didn't call out. She just stepped back, loaded the shotgun, and set her boots tight on her feet. Josiah was already outside, tying off the last of the tripwire at the fence line. When she stepped onto the porch, he looked up once and nodded. No words needed. They made a plan weeks ago, where to draw fire, where to retreat, which stump to flip if they had to run. But now, standing under that silver morning sky, both knew they wouldn't be running. The first shot cracked before the men even reached the main gate. Josiah dropped to a crouch behind the oak half-wall he'd built into the porch, fired twice and ducked. One horse spooked and bolted downhill, its rider thrown sideways and left crumpled in the brush. Mercy moved from the side window to the attic slit, eyes calm, mouth set. A second man came around the barn with a torch. She fired. He went down hard and didn't move again. Then came the shouting, the chaos. Smoke rose from the tall grass where one of the torches had landed, and the horse of the fourth man reared, screaming. He lost control and took a bullet in the gut from Josiah, who'd already shifted position. Only one man made it to the front porch. He was older than the others, lean, with long gray hair and a preacher's mouth, Thomas Hale's hired judge cousin, Mercy guessed. He raised a pistol with a shaky hand and said, "Drop your weapon, or I burn this whole place to ash." Mercy stepped out slow, not from the front door but the side, the shotgun held one-handed like it weighed nothing. "You already tried fire," she said. "Didn't take." He turned too late. She fired from 20 feet. The man fell backward off the porch with a wet grunt, limbs twitching. Silence followed, thick and unbroken. Smoke curled from the field. The smell of blood and burnt horsehair hung in the air. Josiah stood slowly, shoulders heaving, chest streaked with soot and sweat. Mercy stepped beside him, wiping a fleck of ash from her cheek. "Anyone left?" he asked. She scanned the tree line, not standing. They buried the bodies in the south gully. No prayers, no markers. Josiah cleaned the rifles while Mercy mended the roof where a stray shot had chewed through a shingle. By evening, they sat on the porch with tin cups of black coffee, watching the smoke drift low across the treetops. "What now?" she asked. "They'll call it murder. Then we prove it was." He looked at her, "Or we vanish." Mercy shook her head. "No, not this time. We stay, we plant." So they did. The law didn't come again. Not that year, not the next. The fire, the shots, the spilled blood, all of it seemed to settle into the land like it belonged there, like it had always been there. In spring, they built a new fence line. In summer, they harvested beans and squash and set up a still. Josiah's limp never went away, but he walked straighter. Mercy took in 2 orphan girls from the next county when a sickness left them with no kin, and neither girl ever asked what the shotgun nailed above the fireplace was for. Sometimes Josiah would find Mercy out back, standing where the ridge dropped away into the valley. She'd stand there with her arms folded, hair pulled back, watching the wind pass through the trees. He'd come up quiet and lay a hand on her shoulder. She never flinched. One night years later, he asked her, "Why'd you stay?" She didn't answer right away. "Then, because I wanted to see what happened if I was never left." He took her hand then, she let him. Their house stood another 40 years, through storms and drought and another war. Long after they were gone, folks still spoke of the widow who married a broken man the same day she was left behind, of the way she looked strangers in the eye like she was reading their sins, of the blood-soaked ridge no one ever tried to take again. No one built on that land after. but the wind still moved through the tall grass. And sometimes, when the light hit just right, people swore they saw a woman standing at the edge of the ridge, her dress catching the wind, watching something far off that no one else could see.